If you enjoyed this interesting video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring you even more exciting and thought-provoking content. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads. Join our growing community today. Your feedback, comments, and ideas truly keep this channel alive.
Chapter 1: The Rise of Kassa Mercha. In the rugged landscapes of northern Ethiopia, a child named Kassa Mercha was born in 1837 in the Tigray region. From an early age, he showed signs of intelligence, courage, and an unyielding spirit. The world he entered was fractured. Ethiopia was not a unified nation, but a patchwork of rival provinces, each ruled by ambitious nobles. Power shifted constantly, and only those with both skill and cunning could survive. Kassa was born into the noble lineage of Tigray, giving him both opportunity and responsibility. He would soon learn that leadership demanded more than birthright. It required strategy, courage, and the ability to command respect. As a young man, Kassa quickly demonstrated his military talent. He trained under experienced generals, mastering the use of swords, spears, and firearms. His understanding of terrain and tactics was remarkable for his age. Many nobles underestimated him because of his youth, but Kassa's victories in minor skirmishes earned him a reputation as a rising force in Tigray. People began to whisper that this young noble might one day unify the fractured northern provinces under a single, strong leadership. The political climate of Ethiopia at that time was chaotic. Rivalries between regional lords often erupted into violence. Kassa witnessed firsthand how alliances could shift overnight, and how a misstep could mean death. This environment shaped his thinking. He realized that brute force alone would not be enough to secure his position. He needed alliances, diplomacy, and the ability to inspire loyalty in others. Slowly, he began forging connections with other influential families, using both marriages and promises of protection to strengthen his influence. Kassa's rise was also defined by his deep faith. A devout Ethiopian Orthodox Christian, he believed his destiny was guided by divine providence. He often sought counsel from church leaders, understanding that religion could unify the people even as politics divided them. This devotion won him the loyalty of many who respected his piety as much as his strength. Over time, he became not only a military leader but also a moral figure whose vision extended beyond simple conquest. By the early 1860s, Kassa had consolidated control over much of Tigray. His reputation grew, and he earned the respect of both allies and enemies. Tales of his tactical brilliance spread across the region. In one notable battle, he commanded his troops to feign retreat, luring a larger army into a trap. The maneuver succeeded flawlessly, with Kassa's forces emerging victorious against overwhelming odds. Stories like these earned him a reputation as a master strategist, someone who could outthink and outfight even the most experienced commanders. But Kassa knew that local victories were not enough. Ethiopia was still fractured, and a greater challenge awaited anyone who aspired to unite the country. The late 19th century brought new threats from foreign powers, including Egypt and the Mahdist forces in Sudan. Kassa realized that a strong, centralized leadership was necessary not just to rule but to protect Ethiopia's independence. He began envisioning a future where he could become the unifying figure for all Ethiopians, a leader capable of standing against foreign invaders and internal rivalries alike. Kassa's personal qualities were as important as his military skill. He was known for his fairness and ability to inspire loyalty. Soldiers who fought under him were willing to follow him into the most dangerous battles, confident that he would lead them wisely. Villagers and townspeople alike respected him for protecting the weak and punishing the unjust. This combination of strategic brilliance, moral authority, and personal courage set Kassa apart from other leaders of his time. By the late 1860s, the foundations of what would become Emperor Yohannes IV were firmly in place. Kassa had proven himself in battle, built crucial alliances, and earned the trust of both his people and the church. Yet, he faced even greater challenges ahead. The path to the throne of Ethiopia would demand extraordinary resilience, wisdom, and leadership. Kassa was no longer just a regional noble. He was a figure whose actions could change the fate of an entire nation. This chapter marks the beginning of Kassa Mercha's transformation from a young noble into Yohannes IV, the emperor who would defend Ethiopia against invaders, unite a fractured nation, and become one of its most revered rulers. His journey was just beginning, and the battles, both political and military, would test every skill he had honed since childhood. Chapter 2: The Path to the Throne. By the late 1860s, Kassa Mercha had become a formidable force in northern Ethiopia, his reputation as a strategist and warrior growing with each victory. Yet, controlling Tigray was only the first step. The empire was fractured, with powerful regional rulers vying for influence, and the throne remained contested. The journey from regional noble to emperor required both courage on the battlefield and shrewd political maneuvering. Kassa knew that every alliance, every decision, and every skirmish would determine his fate. Kassa's first challenge was to consolidate his power across the northern provinces. Neighboring lords often resisted his authority, fearing that his growing influence threatened their own control. Rather than relying solely on force, Kassa combined diplomacy with decisive military action. He forged strategic marriages, secured loyalty through promises of protection, and rewarded those who pledged allegiance. At the same time, he demonstrated his military prowess in skirmishes that were carefully calculated to intimidate without unnecessary bloodshed. This balance of strength and diplomacy became his hallmark. One pivotal battle in this period showcased Kassa's tactical genius. A coalition of rival nobles marched against him, confident that their numerical advantage would overwhelm his smaller, well-trained force. Kassa anticipated their movements and positioned his troops strategically on the hillsides overlooking the plain. When the enemy advanced, he feigned retreat, drawing them into a trap. At the critical moment, Kassa's hidden reserves attacked from the flanks, turning the tide decisively. The victory not only solidified his control over Tigray, but also sent a powerful message to the entire region. Kassa Mercha was a leader to be respected and feared. As his influence expanded, Kassa's vision began to extend beyond the north. He understood that Ethiopia's independence was under threat from external forces, particularly Egypt and the emerging Mahdist movement in Sudan. To safeguard his people, he began building a network of alliances with other Ethiopian provinces. These alliances were complex. Loyalty could shift overnight, and betrayals were not uncommon. Kassa had to navigate this intricate web of politics, balancing firmness with flexibility. He cultivated relationships with religious leaders, recognizing that the Ethiopian Orthodox Church was a unifying force capable of strengthening his legitimacy. Kassa's moral authority became just as important as his military victories. He earned a reputation for fairness, punishing those who committed injustices and protecting the vulnerable. His soldiers were devoted to him, inspired not only by his skill but also by his sense of justice. Civilians, too, respected him, seeing in Kassa a leader who could unify the nation and defend it against foreign threats. This combination of strength, strategy, and integrity set him apart from other contenders for power. By 1871, Kassa's influence had grown to the point where he could challenge the existing claimants to the Ethiopian throne. The empire had no clear ruler, and rival factions were preparing for conflict. Kassa's decision to advance was deliberate. He had spent years building alliances, consolidating power, and honing his military strategies. Now, he was ready to take the next step. His army, loyal and battle-hardened, moved strategically through the northern provinces, confronting rivals not only with force but with the promise of stability and fair governance. The decisive moment came at the Battle of Adwa, a clash that would determine who would control Ethiopia. Kassa's tactical brilliance was on full display as he positioned his forces to exploit the terrain, used feints to confuse the enemy, and coordinated a precise assault that broke the opposing lines. Victory was achieved not merely through numbers but through superior strategy, discipline, and leadership. This triumph marked Kassa's emergence as the dominant power in Ethiopia, paving the way for his coronation as Emperor Yohannes IV. Even after ascending to the throne in 1872, Kassa, now Yohannes IV, understood that the challenges were far from over. Ethiopia remained a land of competing interests, and foreign threats loomed. But his experiences in the northern provinces had prepared him for the enormous task ahead. The lessons learned in strategy, diplomacy, and leadership would guide him as he worked to unify Ethiopia and defend its sovereignty against all odds. Kassa's transformation into Yohannes IV was complete, yet his journey was just beginning. The battles ahead would test his courage, intelligence, and moral authority on a scale far greater than anything he had faced in Tigray. The rise of this young noble to emperor was not just a personal triumph, it was the beginning of a new era for Ethiopia, one in which a determined leader would strive to unite a fractured nation and protect it from the pressures of both internal rivals and foreign invaders. Chapter 3: Defending Ethiopia's Borders. After ascending to the throne in 1872, Emperor Yohannes IV faced the immediate challenge of securing Ethiopia's borders. The young emperor had united the northern provinces, but threats from foreign powers loomed large. Egypt sought control over the rich territories along the Red Sea and the Nile, while the Mahdist movement in Sudan threatened the western frontier. For Yohannes, the survival of Ethiopia depended not only on political alliances but on decisive action in the field. Yohannes understood that diplomacy alone would not suffice. His military campaigns had to combine strategy, speed, and discipline. He began reorganizing his army, instilling a level of training and coordination that many regional forces lacked. Soldiers were drilled to follow precise commands, maneuver quickly across difficult terrain, and remain disciplined under fire. This professional approach set him apart from other leaders and gave Ethiopia a fighting force capable of confronting better-equipped invaders. One of his first major challenges came from the Egyptian forces in 1875. They had advanced into Ethiopian territory, threatening trade routes and local settlements. Yohannes acted decisively. He personally led his troops, demonstrating courage and tactical brilliance. At the Battle of Gundet, he exploited the terrain to his advantage, positioning his forces in narrow mountain passes where the Egyptian numerical superiority counted for little. When the enemy advanced, Yohannes' army struck with precision, overwhelming the invaders in a devastating ambush. The victory was complete, forcing the Egyptians to retreat and signaling to the region that Ethiopia would resist foreign domination at any cost. Following Gundet, the Egyptian army returned the next year with reinforcements, hoping to reclaim lost ground. Yohannes once again took command, rallying his forces at the Battle of Gura in 1876. The fighting was intense, with artillery and modern firearms on both sides. Yet Yohannes' leadership proved decisive. He coordinated a series of flanking maneuvers, keeping his soldiers focused and disciplined even in the chaos of battle. Despite facing a well-armed enemy, Ethiopia emerged victorious again, solidifying Yohannes' reputation as a military genius and protector of the nation. While battles raged on the northern front, Yohannes also had to manage internal stability. Ethiopia was still a land of powerful regional lords, each with their own ambitions. Some questioned the authority of a young emperor, while others sought to exploit conflicts for personal gain. Yohannes relied on a combination of diplomacy, religious authority, and military presence to maintain loyalty. He convened councils of nobles and church leaders, emphasizing unity, justice, and the shared responsibility of defending the nation. His moral authority, combined with his proven battlefield successes, helped win the support of many who might otherwise have opposed him. The western frontier presented a different challenge. The Mahdist movement, fueled by religious and political fervor in Sudan, began encroaching on Ethiopia's borders. Unlike the Egyptian forces, the Mahdists employed guerrilla tactics and were highly mobile, striking quickly and retreating before a conventional army could respond. Yohannes adapted, employing smaller, more agile units to counter these fast-moving threats. He personally led reconnaissance missions and coordinated ambushes, using terrain knowledge and intelligence networks to outmaneuver the invaders. His ability to combine strategic foresight with hands-on leadership kept Ethiopia's western borders secure. Throughout these campaigns, Yohannes demonstrated a rare combination of courage, intelligence, and compassion. He visited villages affected by the fighting, ensuring that civilians received protection and aid. He rewarded soldiers not just for bravery but for discipline and loyalty, fostering a culture of respect and trust within his army. His leadership extended beyond battlefield tactics. It was about inspiring a nation to stand together in the face of multiple threats. By the late 1870s, Ethiopia had emerged stronger under Yohannes' leadership. The emperor had defended the nation against powerful foreign armies, solidified internal loyalty, and laid the groundwork for a centralized, disciplined military. Yet, the challenges were far from over. Rival factions within Ethiopia, ongoing threats from neighboring powers, and the complex politics of the region meant that Yohannes' skills would be tested continuously. Chapter 3 closes with Yohannes IV standing on the northern highlands, surveying the lands he had defended with courage and strategy. The battles against Egypt and the Mahdists had proven his ability to command armies, inspire loyalty, and protect his people. But the emperor knew that the future of Ethiopia demanded more than victories on the battlefield. It required vision, resilience, and the wisdom to navigate both war and politics in the years to come. Chapter 4: Uniting a Fractured Empire. After securing Ethiopia's northern and western borders, Emperor Yohannes IV faced a new challenge: unifying the fragmented provinces under a single, stable rule. The empire was a patchwork of semi-independent regions, each governed by local rulers with their own armies, traditions, and ambitions. Many of these lords had long histories of rivalry, and decades of fragmented leadership had created deep mistrust. Yohannes understood that military victories alone would not be enough to secure lasting unity. He needed diplomacy, fairness, and a vision that could inspire loyalty across the nation. Yohannes began by reinforcing alliances with regional nobles. He convened councils and meetings, inviting local leaders to discuss matters of governance, taxation, and defense. These discussions were not merely symbolic. Yohannes sought to understand local concerns while asserting the authority of the imperial throne. He emphasized that a united Ethiopia would be stronger, more resilient against foreign threats, and capable of providing stability for its people. Leaders who recognized the value of unity were rewarded with positions of influence and respect. Yet not all nobles were willing to cooperate. Some saw Yohannes rise as a threat to their power and resisted his authority. In these cases, the emperor combined negotiation with calculated displays of strength. He sent emissaries to warn of consequences but remained open to compromise. When negotiations failed, he personally led military campaigns to bring rebellious provinces under control. His approach was measured. He sought to minimize unnecessary bloodshed while demonstrating decisively that the emperor's authority could not be ignored. Religion played a key role in Yohannes' strategy. A devout Ethiopian Orthodox Christian, he leveraged the influence of the church to unify the population. The church provided moral guidance, mediated disputes, and promoted loyalty to the emperor as a divinely sanctioned leader. Yohannes himself often met with clergy to seek counsel and ensure that religious leaders supported his vision for a stable and united Ethiopia. By intertwining religious authority with political leadership, he strengthened both his legitimacy and his ability to maintain peace. Administrative reforms were another tool for unification. Yohannes worked to standardize taxation, legal systems, and military organization across the provinces. He encouraged local leaders to adopt these systems, often providing guidance and support rather than imposing strict orders. By demonstrating fairness and competence, he earned the respect of many who had previously been skeptical of imperial rule. His reforms also made it easier to mobilize resources and troops quickly, which was essential for defending the nation against external threats. Yohannes' personal example inspired loyalty throughout the empire. He often visited remote regions, meeting with local communities and addressing grievances directly. Soldiers and civilians alike admired his courage, fairness, and dedication. Tales of the emperor's actions, whether leading troops into battle, protecting villages from raids, or mediating disputes, spread quickly. These stories strengthened his reputation and encouraged a sense of shared identity among the people. Despite his efforts, challenges persisted. Rival factions continued to plot, and internal unrest occasionally flared into violence. Yohannes addressed these situations with a careful mix of diplomacy and force, always mindful of the broader goal: a unified, strong Ethiopia. He was patient but firm, understanding that lasting unity required time, persistence, and consistent demonstration of both strength and justice. By the early 1880s, Yohannes IV had achieved significant success. Many previously independent provinces recognized his authority, pledged loyalty, and contributed to the empire's governance. Ethiopia was no longer a loose collection of warring regions but a more centralized state with a clear leader capable of defending its people and coordinating its resources. The emperor's vision of a united nation was taking shape, laying the foundation for the next phase of his reign, confronting foreign powers seeking to exploit Ethiopia's strategic position and natural wealth. Chapter 4 closes with Yohannes surveying a council of provincial leaders, confident that his blend of diplomacy, religious influence, and disciplined military force was reshaping Ethiopia. The task of uniting a fractured empire was far from complete, but the progress was undeniable. For the first time in decades, there was a sense that Ethiopia could stand as one nation under a capable and determined emperor. Chapter 5 Confronting the Mahdist Threat. By the early 1880s, Emperor Yohannes IV had achieved significant internal consolidation, uniting much of Ethiopia under his rule. Yet, even as he strengthened his empire from within, threats loomed beyond its borders. One of the most persistent and dangerous adversaries came from the west, the Mahdist forces of Sudan. Driven by religious fervor and political ambition, the Mahdists posed a unique challenge. They were highly mobile, fiercely motivated, and adept at raiding border settlements. For Yohannes, defending Ethiopia against the Mahdists would require both military brilliance and strategic foresight. The Mahdist incursions began as small raids into Ethiopian territory, targeting villages, trade routes, and outposts. Yohannes responded with a mix of reconnaissance, diplomacy, and selective counterattacks. He deployed scouts to monitor enemy movements and gathered intelligence from local communities, ensuring his forces would not be caught off guard. At the same time, he sent envoys to negotiate where possible, aiming to delay conflicts until his army could be fully mobilized. This balance of diplomacy and readiness became a defining feature of his leadership. When larger Mahdist forces crossed into Ethiopia, Yohannes took personal command of the army. His presence on the battlefield inspired loyalty and courage among his troops. He understood that morale was as important as strategy. Soldiers who believed in their leader's courage and skill would fight more effectively. Yohannes' reputation as a disciplined, fair, and decisive commander preceded him, creating an aura of authority that often intimidated enemies before battle even began. One notable engagement occurred along the western frontier, where a sizable Mahdist contingent threatened the region of Metemma. Yohannes used his deep knowledge of the terrain to his advantage. He positioned his forces on high ground, taking control of key choke points that forced the enemy into disadvantageous positions. Using a combination of flanking maneuvers and disciplined infantry formations, Yohannes' army struck decisively. The Mahdist forces were driven back, suffering heavy losses, while Ethiopian troops maintained minimal casualties thanks to careful planning and coordinated tactics. Even in victory, Yohannes displayed strategic foresight. He did not pursue the defeated Mahdists recklessly, understanding that overextension could leave his forces vulnerable. Instead, he reinforced border defenses, improved communication lines between provinces, and ensured that local militias were trained to respond quickly to future threats. His approach combined immediate tactical success with long-term security, strengthening Ethiopia's position against recurring incursions. Yohannes' campaigns against the Mahdists were not only about battlefield tactics. They also served to consolidate loyalty among his generals and provincial leaders. By involving them directly in planning and executing operations, he demonstrated trust in their abilities while reinforcing the importance of coordinated action under central authority. This fostered a sense of shared purpose and strengthened the bonds that held the empire together. Throughout these campaigns, Yohannes maintained his focus on the people of Ethiopia. Villagers in border regions were provided protection, and efforts were made to repair damage caused by raids. His concern for civilians enhanced his legitimacy and ensured that local populations supported the central authority. Soldiers and peasants alike saw him as a protector, not merely a ruler, which further unified the nation behind him. By the mid-1880s, Ethiopia's western frontier was significantly more secure under Yohannes IV. The Mahdist threat, while persistent, had been managed through a combination of superior strategy, disciplined military action, and strong leadership. The emperor's ability to adapt to a mobile and unconventional enemy showcased his tactical brilliance and reinforced his reputation as a defender of Ethiopia's sovereignty. Chapter 5 concludes with Yohannes standing on the western plains, surveying the disciplined formations of his army and the lands they had secured. He understood that threats would continue to emerge, from neighboring powers, internal rivals, and shifting regional dynamics. But his campaigns against the Mahdists had proven his ability to protect Ethiopia. The emperor's combination of courage, strategy, and moral authority had not only defended his nation but also strengthened the foundations of a unified and resilient empire. Chapter 6: Diplomacy and the European Threat. By the mid-1880s, Emperor Yohannes IV had successfully unified much of northern Ethiopia and secured the empire's borders against the Mahdists and other regional threats. Yet a new challenge was emerging from the northeast: the expanding ambitions of European powers. Italy, in particular, had begun establishing a presence along the Red Sea coast, seeking to expand its influence into the Horn of Africa. For Yohannes, diplomacy became as important as military skill. The survival and independence of Ethiopia depended on careful negotiation, strategic foresight, and a willingness to confront foreign powers when necessary. Yohannes understood that European ambitions could not be ignored. Italy, motivated by the desire for colonies and access to trade routes, had already claimed parts of Eritrea and was looking to extend control inland. The emperor's first step was to engage in diplomacy, sending envoys to establish terms and clarify Ethiopia's sovereignty. Yohannes was clear in his communications: Ethiopia would not yield its territories or compromise its independence. At the same time, he recognized the value of treaties and formal agreements as tools to delay or manage potential conflict while strengthening Ethiopia's internal position. Negotiations with Italy were complex. The Europeans often underestimated the intelligence and political acumen of Ethiopian leadership, assuming that traditional kingdoms could be easily manipulated. Yohannes used this to his advantage, presenting a firm but measured stance in diplomatic meetings. He emphasized Ethiopia's strength, the loyalty of his people, and the capability of his army. By doing so, he projected both authority and pragmatism, signaling that while Ethiopia preferred peace, it was fully prepared for war if provoked. While diplomacy unfolded, Yohannes also prepared his army for potential conflict. He understood that the Europeans possessed modern firearms and artillery, which required adjustments in Ethiopian military strategy. He reorganized units, trained soldiers in new formations, and studied European tactics to anticipate their approach. This combination of preparation and deterrence strengthened Ethiopia's negotiating position, showing that the emperor was not merely relying on words but was ready to defend his nation if necessary. One notable aspect of Yohannes' diplomacy was his ability to balance threats from multiple directions. While Italy sought influence in the northeast, Mahdist raids continued sporadically in the west, and internal provincial rivalries remained. Yohannes navigated these challenges with a careful allocation of resources, ensuring that the army remained capable of responding to multiple threats simultaneously. His decisions reflected both strategic foresight and an understanding of human nature, recognizing that enemies could exploit even minor weaknesses. The emperor's diplomatic skill extended beyond formal negotiations. Yohannes cultivated relationships with religious and local leaders, demonstrating Ethiopia's unity and stability to foreign observers. By projecting an image of a strong, cohesive state, he reduced the likelihood of opportunistic invasions and strengthened Ethiopia's reputation on the international stage. This was especially important in dealing with European powers, who were constantly assessing the feasibility of expansion into the African interior. Despite the challenges, Yohannes' approach often prevented open conflict. Strategic concessions were made when necessary, but always without compromising Ethiopia's core sovereignty. He understood that the survival of the empire required patience, prudence, and the ability to combine diplomacy with military readiness. This careful balance became a hallmark of his reign, allowing Ethiopia to maintain independence while other African nations fell under colonial rule. By the late 1880s, Ethiopia under Yohannes IV had emerged as a recognized power in the region. The emperor had demonstrated that African states could resist European encroachment through a combination of diplomacy, military preparedness, and unified leadership. His approach served as both a practical and symbolic model, showing that sovereignty and independence were achievable even in a period of intense foreign pressure. Chapter 6 concludes with Yohannes IV standing on the highlands overlooking the Red Sea plains, reflecting on the delicate balance he maintained. The empire remained sovereign, its borders secure, and its people loyal. Yet the threat of European expansion remained a constant reality. The emperor's leadership had transformed Ethiopia into a nation capable of standing against foreign powers, but the challenges of maintaining unity, security, and independence would continue to test him in the years ahead. Chapter 7: Strengthening the Empire from Within. By the late 1880s, Emperor Yohannes IV had proven himself as both a military strategist and a skilled diplomat. Yet he understood that the long-term survival of Ethiopia depended not only on battlefield victories and treaties but also on strong internal governance. The empire's provinces, though largely loyal, were still semi-autonomous, and maintaining cohesion required careful attention to administration, law, and military organization. Yohannes' focus now turned to consolidating internal power while preparing for the inevitable external challenges that lay ahead. One of his first priorities was military reform. Previous campaigns against Egypt and the Mahdists had shown the importance of a disciplined, well-organized army. Yohannes worked to standardize training, ensure consistent supply lines, and integrate provincial forces into a unified command structure. Officers were chosen based on merit and loyalty, rather than solely on noble birth, which increased efficiency and morale. The emperor himself continued to lead by example, often visiting training camps, observing drills, and demonstrating tactics. Soldiers saw a ruler who was not only commanding but also sharing in their hardships, inspiring loyalty and dedication. Alongside military reforms, Yohannes focused on legal and administrative improvements. He sought to create a system of governance that balanced centralized authority with respect for local customs. Courts were strengthened, and efforts were made to reduce corruption and arbitrariness in tax collection. Provincial governors were held accountable to the emperor, with the understanding that loyalty and competence were rewarded while neglect or abuse of power carried consequences. This approach fostered stability and encouraged local leaders to act in the broader interests of the empire. Religious unity remained another critical tool for Yohannes. A devout Ethiopian Orthodox Christian, he worked closely with church leaders to promote moral guidance, social cohesion, and support for the imperial government. The church acted as both a stabilizing force and a unifying symbol, helping to bridge divisions between regions and peoples. Yohannes' respect for religious institutions reinforced his legitimacy, and in turn, the clergy often encouraged obedience and loyalty among the population. Yohannes also paid careful attention to infrastructure and communication. Roads, bridges, and signaling systems were improved to allow the rapid movement of troops and the efficient administration of the empire. These measures were not just practical, they also demonstrated the benefits of centralized governance to the people, showing that a united empire could provide security, trade opportunities, and improved living conditions. By combining practical reforms with symbolic leadership, Yohannes strengthened both the physical and psychological foundations of his rule. Economic stability was another priority. Yohannes encouraged trade and sought to protect markets from disruption, whether from banditry or external threats. He understood that a prosperous population would support a strong empire, and he worked to create conditions in which local farmers, merchants, and artisans could thrive. By improving stability and fostering prosperity, Yohannes further secured loyalty from both elites and ordinary citizens. Despite these internal successes, the external threats never disappeared. European powers continued to encroach on the Horn of Africa, and the Mahdists remained a persistent danger. Yohannes knew that maintaining a strong internal foundation was essential to facing these challenges. Every reform, every inspection, and every meeting with provincial leaders served the dual purpose of consolidating internal power and preparing Ethiopia for future conflicts. Chapter 7 concludes with Yohannes IV surveying the highlands from his palace, contemplating both the progress he had made and the trials ahead. The empire was stronger, more unified, and better prepared than it had been in decades. Yet, the pressures of external threats and the complexities of governance meant that the emperor's vigilance could never waver. Through disciplined military reforms, administrative improvements, and the cultivation of loyalty, Yohannes was building an Ethiopia capable of defending itself and standing resilient in a turbulent world. Chapter 9: The Final Struggle at Metemma. By 1889, Emperor Yohannes IV had spent nearly 2 decades defending, unifying, and strengthening Ethiopia. His reign had been marked by decisive military victories, skillful diplomacy, and internal reforms that solidified his authority. Yet, even a strong and prepared empire could not escape the persistent threats at its borders. The western frontier remained vulnerable to the Mahdist forces from Sudan, who had grown in strength and boldness. For Yohannes, the confrontation at Metemma would become the defining and final test of his leadership. The Mahdists had launched a significant offensive, aiming to penetrate deep into Ethiopian territory. They sought not only territorial gains but also to challenge the authority of the emperor himself. Yohannes, aware of the stakes, personally led his forces to meet them. The battlefield at Metemma, near the Sudanese-Ethiopian border, was strategically critical. Control over this region meant protecting the surrounding provinces, securing trade routes, and preventing further incursions. Yohannes' leadership would be tested as never before. The preparations for battle were meticulous. Yohannes coordinated his army with precision, placing units in positions that maximized both defense and offensive potential. Scouts were sent ahead to gather intelligence, ensuring that no surprise maneuver by the Mahdists could catch the Ethiopian forces off guard. The emperor personally inspected the troops, offering words of encouragement, blessing their efforts, and emphasizing the importance of defending their homeland. His presence on the field inspired loyalty and courage, reinforcing the dedication of the soldiers who followed him into battle. When the Mahdists advanced, the clash was intense and chaotic. Fighting erupted across the plains, with close-quarters combat mixing with long-range skirmishes. Yohannes led charges and directed troop movements, his commands decisive and clear amid the confusion. The emperor's experience, discipline, and strategic insight were evident in every maneuver. His forces held strong, repelling repeated attacks and attempting to contain the Mahdist advance while minimizing civilian casualties. Despite his leadership, the battle proved costly. The Mahdists were fierce and relentless, their numbers substantial and their resolve hardened by previous engagements. Yohannes fought valiantly on the front lines, personally leading attacks to inspire his men. It was during this critical phase that tragedy struck. The emperor was struck in combat. His fall sent shockwaves through the ranks. Soldiers, though grief-stricken, continued to fight with determination, spurred by the discipline and courage that Yohannes had instilled over the years. Yohannes IV's death marked a turning point. While his army ultimately managed to repel some of the Mahdist forces, the loss of their emperor left a profound void. His leadership, vision, and moral authority had been central to Ethiopia's cohesion and military effectiveness. The Battle of Metemma was both a victory and a tragedy. It demonstrated the resilience of the Ethiopian forces but also underscored the enormous impact of losing a unifying leader. Even in death, Yohannes' legacy endured. The provinces he had united remained largely loyal to his successors, inspired by his example of courage, strategy, and devotion to Ethiopia. The diplomatic and military foundations he had built allowed the empire to continue resisting external threats, preserving its sovereignty during a period when many other African nations were falling under colonial control. His reforms in administration, the church, and the army had created systems that outlasted him, ensuring continuity and stability even in the face of his loss. The story of Yohannes IV is remembered not only for his victories but for his character and leadership. He exemplified the qualities of a ruler who could combine military brilliance with moral authority, diplomacy with decisiveness, and personal courage with strategic foresight. His reign reshaped Ethiopia, defending it from foreign domination, uniting fragmented provinces, and leaving a lasting impression on the nation's history. Chapter 9 closes with a reflection on the enduring impact of Yohannes IV. Though he fell on the battlefield, his vision for a strong, independent, and unified Ethiopia survived. Generations would remember him as the emperor who fought tirelessly for his people, demonstrating that courage, intelligence, and integrity could preserve a nation in the face of extraordinary challenges. His story became a symbol of resilience and leadership, inspiring future Ethiopian rulers to uphold the independence and dignity that Yohannes IV had fought to secure. Chapter 10: Legacy of a Great Emperor. The death of Emperor Yohannes IV in 1889 at the Battle of Metemma marked the end of an era, but his legacy endured long after the battlefield fell silent. Ethiopia had survived external invasions, internal divisions, and the pressures of European colonial ambitions, largely because of his leadership, vision, and relentless dedication. Yohannes' life and reign became a blueprint for strength, unity, and resilience, shaping the destiny of Ethiopia for decades to come. Following his death, the empire faced a critical period of transition. The provinces he had united remained largely loyal, a testament to the relationships, reforms, and moral authority he had cultivated throughout his reign. Leaders and generals who had fought alongside him carried forward his vision, maintaining the stability and cohesion that he had worked tirelessly to achieve. The mantle of leadership eventually passed to Menelik II, who would continue the struggle to protect Ethiopia's independence, building upon the foundations laid by Yohannes IV. Yohannes' military achievements were among the most significant aspects of his legacy. From the early victories in Tigray to the decisive battles against Egypt and the Mahdists, he had demonstrated extraordinary strategic skill and courage. His leadership in these campaigns did not rely solely on personal bravery. It combined careful planning, the disciplined execution of tactics, and the ability to inspire loyalty in those under his command. These battles preserved Ethiopia's sovereignty at a time when neighboring regions were falling under foreign control, solidifying his reputation as one of the greatest military leaders in African history. Equally important was his ability to unify a fractured empire. Before Yohannes, Ethiopia had been a mosaic of semi-independent provinces often in conflict with one another. Through diplomacy, religious guidance, and administrative reforms, he fostered a sense of national identity and purpose. Local leaders were encouraged to participate in governance, while systems of law, taxation, and military organization were strengthened under central authority. These efforts created an enduring framework for governance that would support future emperors and safeguard the integrity of the nation. Religion played a central role in Yohannes' leadership and legacy. His devout Ethiopian Orthodox faith was a unifying force, reinforcing his moral authority and legitimizing his rule. Yohannes worked closely with church leaders, ensuring that religious institutions promoted cohesion, justice, and loyalty to the empire. This alliance between the throne and the church strengthened Ethiopia's social fabric, giving the people a shared sense of purpose and helping to stabilize regions that might otherwise have resisted central authority. Yohannes IV was also remembered for his personal character. Stories of his fairness, courage, and concern for his people circulated widely, creating a lasting impression of a ruler who was both strong and compassionate. He protected civilians during military campaigns, rewarded loyalty, and punished injustice, demonstrating that leadership was about more than victory in battle. It was about earning respect and inspiring trust. This human dimension of his reign ensured that his influence extended beyond military and political accomplishments. Even in the face of death, Yohannes' vision for Ethiopia endured. The nation he had strengthened, defended, and partially unified continued to resist external threats and internal fragmentation. His leadership had proven that a strong, organized, and morally grounded state could survive in a world increasingly dominated by foreign powers. The principles he established, discipline, unity, strategic foresight, and moral authority, would guide future Ethiopian leaders in preserving the nation's independence. Chapter 10 closes with a reflection on the enduring lessons of Yohannes IV's life. He was more than a warrior. He was a visionary who understood that true leadership combined courage, strategy, diplomacy, and justice. Ethiopia survived and thrived because of his tireless efforts, his ability to unite diverse peoples, and his commitment to protecting the sovereignty of his nation. Yohannes IV's story remains a symbol of resilience, honor, and the enduring power of principled leadership, a legacy that continues to inspire Ethiopians and admirers of history around the world.